buenas tardes, mi nombre es Mauricio Novoa, soy el decano de la Facultad de Educación del UPC y esta tarde vamos a conversar con Patrick Ryan, que es el director del Faro Foundation, basado en Oxford, sobre la importancia de los clásicos, de los valores, de las tradiciones en la formación y la educación de las personas. Patrick, why are classics important today in education?
So I think practically at least two reasons. One is the sense of style you can get from the classical authors. So one of the best openings to classical literature that you've got is Caesar's Gallic War, where the first line is, all Gaul is divided into three parts. And it proceeds like that, very crisp, very loyally prose. And that's something in the arts and humanities that you want to impart to students, I think. So clarity of thought, brevity, and economy of words. So that's one aspect. The other is the developing students' character, which you can only really do by example. So by looking to the greats throughout history, Alexander, Caesar, Cleopatra, whoever it is, you get a sense, the student gets a sense of, okay, what are these people like as people? How do they become important? How do they achieve change? That kind of thing. And I think there's no better instructor, really, than the classical text for that.
And if you had to recommend three classical texts that every student has to read, what would you recommend?
Okay, I'd say the Deeds of the Divine Augustus, which is his own very short autobiography, and it starts with, at the age of 19, I raised an army to save the Republic. It's hard to beat that for an opening, and well, self-marketing as well, if you like. Caesar's Gallic Wars, and also the Cyropedia, the life of Cyrus.
The Life of Cyrus.
Yeah, I think you could do a lot worse than to start there.
And why do you think education today doesn't form the character? Why is it not interested in character, in forming character?
So I'd say probably not enough people go back to the originals and to read them. So I don't have Latin and Greek, sadly, but you can read great translations of these. The Loeb Library, other Penguin is another one, and not enough people. These texts seem distant or quite cold. What are they going to teach you today, I think, is the attitude. So no one really reads them and learns from them. Whereas a number of my mentors, that was the first thing they would direct me to.
But I mean, why isn't education in general? Because you mentioned that education had to build character. Why education today, do you think, it's not about building character?
Yeah, it's become about credentials and passing exams, or conforming with ideology in a lot of cases. So if you look at what's taught in many elite Western universities, it's really niche topics that no one beyond the academic that did that research cares much about. And they've lost the sense of scope and depth of the greats and the classics, I think.
And but you think that education on character means only reading certain texts, or it means a bit more?
No, I think I'd always treat them as the starting point. So if you want to be the best lawyer in Peru or America or wherever you are, if you just read the classics, you won't become that. You need to go a step further and practice and get a sense of that.
Yeah.
So, should we?
Sí, sí.
Okay. So I think I would treat reading the classics as the starting point. You're looking at past people's lives and what they achieved, what they read, and how they conducted themselves. So if you want to be a great lawyer in Peru or America or wherever you are, you might start reading Cicero or Caesar, and you get a sense of their style and conduct in the courts. But to really become that yourself, you need to practice, and you need to sort of take the parts that you read about and think, oh, that's useful, that's interesting, and try and incorporate them into your speech, into your style, into your preparation for whatever you're doing. So in short, the greats, the classics, as it were, they're fascinating and instructive in their own right, but they are and they were meant to be practical and useful to the people who are reading them.
And it is through the practical part of the classics that character is built, or you need something else?
Well, you need a very strong internal moral compass and set of principles, religious or political, covering the whole span of existence. So you want to start from a position where you want to build your character. No one's character comes out fully formed. So you're looking to great mentors in your real life to develop all of those things, your religion, your sets of principles, and so on. And what about you? What are your favorite classics? Where would you start?
For me, I think it would be the parallel lives. I don't know
Plutarch.
if it's Plutarch, the parallel lives, and I enjoyed a lot. I don't know how. I think it's Cassius Dio, the lives of the Caesars, no, and of course the discourses of Cicero, no. I mean, I think also you need some sort of poetry in it. Talking about great sort of starting points, the Eneida, no, the Aeneid. How do you say it in English?
The
Eneid.
Virgil, yeah.
Arma virumquem caro. I think is one of the great sort of startings. I sing to the men and to the arms. I think that's. I mean, for me, that's one of the great sort of startings. No, it has this. I mean, as you say, this sort of a simplicity, a crispness, sort of capability to sort of condensate concepts, and of course, again, it's very. It's an integral part of the classic world in which you can talk about art and war, something that the modern world and the sort of separation of things has.
So I think looking back over the last few hundred years, it's achieved an awful lot for humanity, science that is, sort of travel, building, medicine, you name it, science has swept all before it. And that's become a sort of pretty attractive way at looking at everything in the world. But in doing so and hollowing it out, I think we've lost something, which is this sort of value of tradition, whether it's sort of local national music or poetry. So where I'm from in the north of Britain, the traditional poetic form would be border ballads. So stories of raids between England and Scotland and so on. And that was the predominant form. But they're little read today. And it's a shame. They're enormously edifying and educational and historically fascinating. And yeah, I think in today's world we need to take sort of stock of local tradition and try and first of all preserve it, but also enhance it and build on it.
So why is traditional important?
It gives us, whether it's a family, a locality, or a nation, or a civilization, a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning, and a sense of themselves. I hate the word, but identity. That we share something, some inherited tradition, that gives us coherence and purpose in the world.
But is there something? Of course, it is understandable that sort of tradition obviously roots us in things, and local or national tradition into your sort of cultural being. But is it only that, or you think sort of tradition gives you some other things that is not necessarily like a sort of cultural construct?
Yes, so I think most traditions and culture will contain some deep truth expressed differently that they're embodying and sort of passing on. So it's not just about the group collective side. There's something inherent in that.
Something like passing on a truth, you were saying, something that goes beyond the sort of cultural.
Yes, so gives expression to some inherent facet of human nature. And of course that can be done better or worse in different cultures, different religions. So it's not about just saying everything's equal, every culture is equally valid, wonderful, etc. It's like, no, sometimes it's genuinely done better and worse.
And when do you think was the sort of tipping point when we stopped talking about sort of civilization as something good? I mean, I always think that this famous program of Kenneth Clark in the first the book and then the series in the sort of 60s, and I mean, and the 60s is really not very far from our age. I mean, in the sense that we know a lot of people who were born in the sort of 60s or before, but and to him and to the people of his time, to talk about civilization was a good thing, was a sort of positive thing. We all aimed to be sort of more civilized, or we aimed or we looked at sort of civilizations as something good. When did we stop thinking of civilization as a good thing?
Sort of before my time, but I suspect that started to creep in the 80s and well, from the 60s onwards. So what people often forget is the subtitle to Kenneth Clark's Civilization is a personal view. And really what it's a fantastic expression of is his lifetime of learning going into it and giving out his judgments on art, culture, history, that kind of thing. Whereas if you watch the remake from a few years ago, which is called Civilizations, it feels just more like a committee. There's no, it just feels bare of humanity, character, played it very safe, that kind of thing.
And what happened? Why did we change from civilization, a personal view, to civilizations? How can you explain this in a sort of simple way?
So it's probably the onset of moral and cultural relativism over the last few decades, that it's somehow impolite or evil or wicked to express a judgment on a particular art, culture, civilization. So they should all be treated as equally valid and just the same, but expressed differently.
So like a misunderstood form of charity?
Yeah, a sort of pathological form of charity and politeness. And the phrase is political correctness, I think. But yeah, it's something like that, like a deformed view of charity and what respect for another culture means, things like that.
And which variables do you think express that? How did that come about? How did politically correctness came about?
I think through a lot of the philosophers from the 60s onwards, postmodernism, sort of standard bearers of that, and the spread of that across most of the arts and humanities.
But I mean, I would just want you to explain this so that an 18-year-old kid who doesn't have a reference about philosophy can understand. What are the main ideas under that? In a very in a sense that you don't have to cite Foucault, and if you do want to cite Foucault, just cite it as an Foucault because he thought this, but because we're going to make like also like short quips of this.
Okay.
So that someone who's not familiar with or doesn't have many readings can understand it.
Okay, so I think what's gone wrong, as you say, is a kind of defamation of charity, a sense of charity and what it means to respect another culture, accompanied with a kind of creeping self-hatred for our own tradition and the great things that's built, whether it's in the broader sense of Western civilization or in the more particular sense of Latin civilization or Anglo-American civilization, as an attempt to just flatten everything, that every culture is the same, equally valid.
And why do you think that we wanted to flatten everything? Well, I mean, what's the purpose in that? How come they thought that was good?
I think so. So the reason I think that's good is it's something. Sorry, I'll start again.
Yeah.
It's something like a kind of critical theory ideology which incorporates things like moral relativism. Every culture is the same. It's wrong or evil to point out judgments or make judgments on another culture. Does that answer? I'm trying. Sorry, go back. Sorry,
yes.
What was the original? Go back to the question.
Why do you think that we started sort of hating each other and hating our own sort of culture or the achievements of the West?
Yeah. So I think the reason why we are where we are is partly a misplaced sense of politeness, that to respect another culture is to just say it as good as our own. There's nothing materially different about it, and it's racist or evil or prejudiced or whatever it is to make judgments on that other culture. and at the same time sort of losing our own tradition and sense of self and appreciation for our own art, history, philosophy, etc. And those two combinations of things, I think, have led to the kind of place we're in today.
And what's the way out?
Well, I would say a complete overhaul of education from childhood onwards. So really, I think what people need to get out of this is a really good grounding in history and their own national history for good and bad. A really good sense of the cultural, their traditions, music, poetry, literature. And so I think the way out is a renewal of deep education from childhood through to university and beyond. So instilling and showing students their own history, their own traditions, poetry, literature, art, and instilling in them an appreciation and a love for that. And I think once they can appreciate and love their own culture, they're actually in a much better position to make judgments, positive or otherwise, of cultures they encounter elsewhere.